Hello and welcome to my Journey Showcase, where we will be exploring my biggest question this semester, which is how can we make the hero's journey more accessible? Most of Fall B has been spent studying the larger-than-life and frequently harrowing adventures of people such as Ernest Shackleton, Ed Shafford, and my personal favorite, Cheryl Strayed. But I'm left wondering, is it possible for an ordinary person such as myself to undergo a psychological and or spiritual metamorphosis without circumventing the globe or trekking across an unforgiving jungle? Can I transform myself and still keep my 9 to 5, essentially? Well, it turns out that you can. You just can turn to these people for advice. Julie Powell. These are very crude drawings, so please excuse me. I put a lot of effort in, though. An otherwise average American woman, Julie Powell sought to revitalize her marriage, restore her ambition, and find her soul by cooking her way through 542 recipes in Mastering the Art of French Cooking by Julia Child within the span of 365 days. She blogged her way through this journey. Later, it became a published bestseller, and after that, turned into a film starring Meryl Streep. So, as successful as you could possibly get. Another noteworthy home adventurer is A.J. Jacobs, an American journalist who spent a year literally abiding by the 700 plus rules listed in the Bible. He has a TED Talk, actually, so if you look him up, I strongly recommend it. He describes himself as a human guinea pig. And we're also going to use my future self as an example, the pre-journeyer. Journeyer? Given this is my last college course before graduation, and I will have plenty of free time on my hands at the start of the new year, I'm endeavoring to read 100 literary works in 2019 with the purpose of rediscovering my love for reading and nourishing my mental and emotional health, because it has been neglected for quite some time. You may be thinking right now, Alyssa, do you actually believe it's fair to associate these stay venturers with those of the world adventurers? And that's a perfectly valid question. We've been studying these life or death journeys all semester. It's at this point a guarantee that if you just risk your life out in the wilderness for 90 plus days, you're really going to emerge having shed your former self. But if we use the tools given to us over the course of this course, we can measure these stay ventures and find that you don't necessarily need to risk your life to yield transformative results, or risk your bank account. So let's look at the home adventurers alongside the scale of adventure given to us in Module 2. So from lowest to highest order of adventure, we have escape, simulated, adrenaline, imposed, and inspired. Those studied in class are inspired, but I'm arguing right now that these stay ventures rank the same. So is it generative? I would say Julie, AJ, and myself are all expanding our identities and inventing new solutions. Of course, to varying degrees. Like, for example, AJ had to carry around his own seat because apparently there's a rule in the Bible where men cannot sit where a menstruating woman has once sat. And so he's married, living in New York, so that took a lot of clever solutions. Me, on the other hand, I'll just simply have to turn down social outings and get a library card. But nonetheless, we are reinventing and reconsidering ourselves and our routines. So check. Unpredictable. Absolutely. Again, to varying degrees. No 2 days are the same when you are trying to go from, cooking duck to making mousse, or just not shaving your beard for 100 days straight. I'm sure things can go wrong. And then daring. Absolutely. Enticing. I'm going to say yes. Of course, not to everyone, but I imagine a niche demographic will be attracted to these different adventures. And is it spiritual or enlightening? And I have to say absolutely. After all, I believe this is our shared purpose. Julie, AJ, and I are all actively seeking new knowledge, aka enlightenment, specific or otherwise. Another overlap in the Venn diagram between the studied journeys and these home adventures is their status along the infinite and finite game scale. While there may be elements of a finite game within these journeys, like for example, they have a specific finite destination, whether that be the end of a 1,000-page cookbook or crossing a bridge into Washington, they're all still infinite players, or at least finite players breaking free of the arbitrary rules of conventional life, transitioning into infinite play, where they don't need an audience of people or a conventional opponent to defeat. Instead, we're attempting to play so we can sustain that play. What Cheryl and Julie and I and many others have in common is that we may be a little bit jaded by these conventional finite rules, again, to varying degrees, seriously, and by experimenting with infinite play, or by creating our own game, we're allowing ourselves to learn that life is meant for play. So with that being said, what is the answer to the original question, how do we make journeys more accessible? And to that I say, I have a formula. So 1, we take identifying something that you've always daydreamed about. If we don't know what our goal is, you'll never get there. Thank you to Module 3. But maybe you watch tiny house videos, or maybe you are looking to vlog for a year and lose a bunch of weight and be healthy. Odds are you have one dream that you revisit the most or find extra interesting. I recommend choosing that one. So we check your inspired box. Next, choose a relatively extreme goal or destination for this day venture. Typically, this is reflected in just a very long stretch of time. As demonstrated by this brief presentation, a year is the standard benchmark for an effective timeline. If we don't make it long enough, we can risk making this adventure a more lower order adventure like escape or simulated or adrenaline. The trick with these day ventures is to increase the timeline to balance the lack of literal encounters with death, and we can make it tough and bring in those imposed elements. And then last, you have to actually do it, and also helps to document it. That's a bonus. And then you wait for change to happen. The do it is probably the hardest, at least for me, and I guess for many other people, having spent 25 years on this earth. Whether you're sailing around the world or trying to read 100 books in a year, it's going to be tough. Journeys are the loveliest and most palatable in the idea stage, but it really just it comes down to the action, or else it just remains an abstract idea. So additionally, as demonstrated in our journaling activities, documenting the journey daily allows us to stay present and on track to our destination. We can see where we've been, allow ourselves to accept the stage we're at in our journey, and remember why we started, to keep powering forward. In the end, you'll have an article published in the New York Times, or maybe your story will become an Oscar-nominated motion picture. At the very least, I think maybe you'll simply come one step closer to the person you always wanted to be. And maybe, just maybe, you'll choose to play again.